Okay, hi people, welcome to this talk about running system tests with active authentication and authorization. Thank you for showing up. I hope we can get some value of this together. I'm the one standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to make this as pleasant as possible. We are going to cover quite a lot of ground when it comes to technologies and questions and whatnot in this kind of short session. So if you want to kind of dig deeper into the problems, the technologies, whatever, I'll be around for today and tomorrow. So just grab me in the hall and I'd love to have a chat with you guys. Topic of the day, running system tests with active authentication and authorization. So this story starts with well-known security TXT. So a security researcher has identified a potential issue in a system. He digs out this file, he gets information about how to contact our security department and sends us a little report. We get this report, we thank him. I sincerely hope that we'll be able to provide some bug bounties in the future, but not yet. And we contact the team that own the system and start digging into what is this. So it seems to be a test system that seems to be open on the internet, and quite a few of the security features are disabled. And it also contains recent data from production, so it's not like fake or synthetic data. That data shouldn't be out there, the endpoint should be protected, and so on. And then when we kind of process that information, we typically do a post-mortem with our team and try to figure out what went wrong, what can we do differently, and so on. And the teams tells us, well, we should maybe do more security testing, we should do it differently, but doing this kind of security testing and making this properly is super hard. And then from the AppSec team that I'm joining, we typically dig into this and see if we can create some patterns that the teams can use to make things a bit more secure. And that's the contents of this talk. So the objective is to make teams more curious on diverting more efforts into system testing with authentication, authorization, and other security features activated. Why do we pursue this objective? Well, it will have an impact on mitigating well-known security risks, stuff that you see in the Authn, both for web apps and APIs and so on, with broken access control, misconfiguration, and so on. Most of these kind of things were in play in our scenario. A disclaimer, the more I learn about this topic at hand, the more I realize how complex it is. I am not an expert, and life is not simple, and all solutions have trade-off. And there are always more than one solution to a problem, and your context really, really matters. So my kind of goal on application security, there is no end state. I just learn and I improve, and that's how I roll, and that's how I kind of tackle these kind of things as well. So in this presentation, you may see patterns that are kind of risky, and you have questions. I'd love to get your questions, and I'd love to get your insight on these kind of things if you have other ways of doing it. So please share. You will get access to the slide and code and everything afterwards, but this code is not production quality, so don't just put it in production and say it was good because the presenter said so. I use these kind of code bases as teaching security, application security, and it deliberately contains some bad stuff, so don't use it without thinking. And some of the patterns that we discuss are risky, so be cautious. What my really recommendation is that you do a threat modeling exercise on your test system as well. So when you have set up all the kind of stuff and automated everything, do a threat model, ask yourself the question, what could possibly go wrong? So I'm Lars Skjorestad, that's Norwegian stuff, so Lars will do just fine. I'm a software developer, I'm an application security advocate in Equinor's application security team. Equinor is a Norwegian energy company. I'm living on the west coast of Norway, one wife, 3 grown-up kids. The hobbies that I have besides coding is Gran Fondo cycling. I know that it doesn't look like that, but I really enjoy that. And then fly fishing. So that's one of my kind of passions as well. I'm Lars Skjorestad on LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, and recently Mastodon, InfoSec and Change. Not very active, just trying to figure out what's going to happen in that space. So I kind of grab my handle there as well. If you want to learn more about what we do in AppSec and Equinor, appsec.equinor.com is the page you want to visit. The outline for this talk is some observations. We're going to have a look at the demo system, then we're going to discuss test principle and technical challenges, and then we're going to explore a hands-on solution, how we can tackle a few of the problems, and then we go in for wrap-up and Q&A at the end. So some observations that I did in this incident, but all over at our company and other companies as well, is that team report to us that 80% of their test effort is spent on unit testing, very little on integration testing and system testing. They also tell us that authentication authorizations are either mocked or stubbed and disabled when testing. They also say that security features are often disabled or mocked or stubbed when we do testing as well. And of course, that is hard. We don't write a lot of security-related tests. Most of our tests have a functional kind of perspective. Most of the teams also say that we really would like to do more integration and system testing, but they say it's super hard and it's time-consuming. And they also say that, or have this kind of perception that these tests are fragile and they're hard to maintain. To some level, they are right, but it's a lot better than it used to be back in the days. The challenges have obviously multiple perspectives. We have the technical side with personal skills, proficiency, team composition, and team capacity, and so on. So I can't really go into a two-person team and tell them to do all this advanced stuff. They don't have the capacity to do that. And team composition, if you want to do the testing properly, you need to have not only developers that can do everything. You need all these kind of skills in the teams. And not the least, the team or company culture. I work with teams, and some of them state that the product owner really doesn't want us to spend a lot of time on testing, push out the features. So all these kind of things matter when you're going to solve this problem at home, and don't think there is any quick fix, because there isn't. So presenting our demo system, the one we're going to look at in a little while, that is this brilliant modern web application called Game of Thrones Episodes. So what you basically can do, you can log in, you can show your inbox, getting that from the Office 365 graph, and you can show basic system. But basic systems typically are pretty much advanced in these kind of days, so this is how it looks from a schematic drawing. So there is a client, a backend, that is serving the front end to the browser. This backend, or this application, is using the backend for front-end pattern. So there are no tokens stored in the client. They are kind of handled in the backend. And we have a token cache. And we have a session store. That one is in memory. This backend talks to the authentication authorization stuff through Azure AD to get the ID tokens, to get the access tokens, and so on. And for that part, we're using OpenID Connect and Authn towards Azure AD. And the code in the backend client is using MSAL, Microsoft Authentication Library, to do the magic. And it's talking to the Episodes API and Quotes API, which are kind of self-sufficient. So a typically flow would be, okay, you hit the application, the backend serves the front page, user clicks, log in. It's kind of sent back to the backend. The backend says, okay, this is a login thing. I will use the OpenID Connect and redirect you back to Azure AD, where you can add your username or password and do MFA and all that kind of stuff. If that's kind of good stuff, you redirect it back to the backend. The backend is getting a code, and it changes that code for an access token for Azure AD and store that in the token cache. So now we are authenticated. We have the ID token as proof of that. And we also have an access token to read the Microsoft graph because we asked for the scope mail.read. So when I then click reading in the inbox, the app kind of takes this access token, hits the Office 365 graph, and gets the contents of my inbox. When I'm talking to the API, similar thing happens. I am authenticated, so that's no problem, but this app backend talks to Azure AD and requests an access token to read the Episodes API. If that kind of goes okay, it gets the access token back, and I send that to the episodes API. The episodes API receives these access tokens and verifies the signature, the claims, and everything to make sure it's kind of okay. And if access is granted, to put it like that, it generates a list of Game of Thrones episodes from a database or whatever. But it also, this pattern has API chaining, which is also pretty normal. So then this episode's API wants to grab an access token to access the quote API on behalf of the user that is kind of logged in. So kind of get complicated. But anyways, episode's API requests this token from Azure AD, hopefully get it, sends it to the quotes API, which verifies the token and the access and so on. If everything is okay, it returns a random quote that is sent to the episodes API, to the client, and back to the front end. So this is a pretty normal pattern for a lot of ES applications that we are talking to a lot of APIs, the API chaining, we need to do the authorization for all kind of access and so on. And it's kind of hard to test. In my opinion, it isn't sufficient to only focus the unit test inside the episodes API and think that is good enough. I would really like teams to spend more effort on testing this as a system from a user perspective. As a little heads up, when we're going to put this in test mode, we're going to switch to using a different flow for the authentication stuff. So we're going to use the flow in the backend called the resource owner password credential rather than the code grant. Right now that is working beautifully, but I see some evidence or discussions in the upcoming standards of OAuth 2.1 that this flow might be deprecated. But for now it's kind of okay. So we'll have to solve that problem for another day later on then. The feature we're going to focus on testing on is one specific use case. From the browser, the user logs in and gets a list of Game of Thrones episodes. And this test will be a system test, so it will utilize all our kind of components. So let's look at some test principles and some technical challenges. So I really benefit teams for creating test principles for their work. They should guide their testing. A few of them could be stuff like, okay, we should automate more or less all of our testing. I say more or less all because I really acknowledge that a good tester that does this properly, he codes automated tests and so on, but he also spends time on doing heuristic testing and so on. That is super kind of beneficial. So more all effort onto automated testing. Non-functional tests are as important as the functional ones. So testing performance, usability, reliability, and security should be equally important to the functional stuff. I set that as a test principle for myself now. I don't want to test in production. I use synthetic test data. I can't risk exposing data that shouldn't be there, so let's keep it all synthetic. Running code should not know that it's under test. That's another principle. And testing should not involve components that I don't own or control. So this list is not exhaustive, it's just an example. Your team should have their own. That's my kind of a take on that. Looking into a few technical challenges, if you have this kind of pattern in the back of your head, we must do the logging through the browser to create a valid session. It has a few issues on its own, but more often than not, handing the authentication over to a different site that is driving the test, in our case to log in Microsoft something, will break the web drivers. I can't control that. I don't have control over that domain. There are no tokens in the browser because we are utilizing the backend for front-end pattern. So that brings some challenges to this thing. When you have the client in the browser, a lot of people will do system testing by getting access token behind the scenes and injecting them into the token cache in the browser and take it from there. We can't do this in this pattern. And this backend for front-end pattern, in my view, is more secure than keeping everything in the client. Because the client could be seen as a kind of protected client. Could we acquire tokens in the test and manipulate the token cache? Remember the client backend had the token cache? Yes, that could be doable. We can get the access tokens, the other tokens from other places, and figure out how the token cache works and inject tokens into that one. And I've tried it, and it works, but it's super dirty and not where I want to spend my money, to put it like that. And if, in our case, Microsoft changes the implementation of their cache, I'm screwed and I have to figure it all out again. So, no, not for me. Could we mess around with a session object in the backend? Yes, we could do that. We could create a fake session and so on, but it will bring challenges to the browser if we don't use the browser, because we still need to support this kind of a session, cookies going back and forth and so on. But yes, that could be done. Again, dirty, not where I want to spend my money. In corporate environments, users have MFA. It makes more or less impossible to automate login for traditional users, ordinary users. So it's kind of super hard. And I've seen quite a few interesting approaches to handle that. One approach that I saw was a camera monitoring like a key device, and some code reading that picture and translating the image to code and injecting it. I don't want to go that way, no way. But then another question that it might be equally important. So our Azure AD, should I even use that as a production device? So if that is the case, our production Azure AD, the identity provider, will be full of production stuff, test stuff, and you know what. And it's so hard to make configuration changes. I thought I was updating development, but I was hitting production, and that's not nice. So I would like to challenge that as well. Could we mock the Azure AD with an Authn mock server component? That is a good question, and it's actually doable. Nav creates a very good mock service that we can use. You can spin up a container. It will provide the necessary endpoints. It will sign tokens. You can configure it to send you the claim that you want, or it's really great. I can't use this in this case because I'm using MSOL from Microsoft. And MSOL from Microsoft, at least in the current state, is Authn OpenAI Connect plus Microsoft. So if you investigate all the flows going back and forth, there's a ton of additional kind of parameters and so on used to drive the framework. So if I throw MSOL against this mock server, it would just kind of break down. It will not work. And I don't intend to implement that stuff in the mock server because that's not where I want to spend my money. Additional consideration that I think is worth making, the choices that we make should, as far as possible, not disable the security features of our system. And I would like to develop as little as possible of test supporting code. So this is my kind of a starting point. And it's time to make some decisions. And like I said, all choices have trade-off, and we try to balance the risk and impact and so on. And we acknowledge that there's a life cycle in question, both for the code I create for my system and my test code, and also for test supporting code. I can't forget about that one. All code that I create needs regular TLC, tender loving care, not to become my worst enemy. That's my kind of take on these things. So for this example, we decide to use the Microsoft Office 365 developer program to acquire a separate Azure AD test environment. And by that, I break one of my principles, but it's kind of okay to break it if you know that you're breaking it. So I say that I'm going to use a component in my testing that I don't control. So when registering an account at that program, I get access to an Azure AD environment for free. And it's really, really useful. I create synthetic test users without MFA to support my automated tests. So now I am in my own Azure AD, and I can script the creation of various test users, roles, groups, whatever, to make sure that I get the proper claims and stuff inside my tokens, but everything is synthetic. I will let our client know that it's under test. So again, I'm breaking a principle, but I do it deliberately, so maybe it makes sense. The test footprint should be as little as possible. If I am in test, I use a different flow to do login. The resource owner password credential is the one I use, not the code grunt. I use Docker and Docker Compose to build and serve the infrastructure for the whole system. So I Dockerize it, basically. And I want to drive the test from an end-user perspective through the browser, and to do that, I use Cypress. Cypress is a tool that I got acquainted with a few years ago, And the more I use it, the more I love it. I think it's super great to drive things from the browser. But these are the decisions we make for our system. I'm not sure you guys can make all the kind of things for your kind of things, but there may be points here that you can take back home and make sense of in your context. Yeah, everything must be fully automated and be able to execute in a pipeline like GitHub Actions or whatever. That is also a premise here. So, exploring one solution. Let me put on my glasses so I can see the screen, but not you guys. So that's kind of okay. I'm putting the stuff into containers. This is how the repo looks. You get access to that one. I'm authorizing my use of my SSH key through 1Password. It's a super great feature, by the way. So that I don't store any private keys on my disk. Anyway, scenario contains the code. It has the client, the episodes API, the quote API, and so on. And I put it in Docker, so this is the Docker YAML file. It defines the services that I have put in use. So one service for the client, one service for the episodes API, one for the quote API, and also an additional one for the Cypress. And in addition, I have created objects to secure this in the Azure AD that I have for my project, the private one, to put it like that. I use Docker Compose to run it. So this is the run command, sets the node environment, and this is the Node.js backend, by the way, to production, and do Docker Compose up on the client episodes and quotes services. So to get this running, what I typically would do is go inside the scenario directory. I would source the file with my configuration. It follows this kind of template of the stuff that you would put in these config files. It would be like the client ID, client secrets, the username of the test users, and so on. I put this in a configuration file. In a real-life production environment, I wouldn't not have put the client secret in like this. This is just for minimizing the number of components to kind of show you guys how I do this. If I did this in production, I would have put the client secrets inside an Azure keyword or stuff like that and extracted while running the tests. So that's the better way of doing that. Okay, so if I then run the application, it fires up everything in Docker Compose, run the 3 services, and I can go to local host 3000, which I told in the config files. If I can hit the 0, this will be a good one. So this is the beautiful application. I sign in. I'm using a synthetic user that I have created. And for this is Adele Vance, so she's great. I pick the password from my password manager, and I sign in. And you notice that now I'm at the login Microsoft.com, not the MAO page, so typically web drivers would not be able to mess around here, typically. I don't want to stay signed in, this is just a demo. Okay, I don't want to save this password in 1Password either. So, show inbox, you know what happened. I have gotten the access token. I send that to the Office 365 graph and get the content of my inbox back. Show Game of Thrones episodes, same thing happening, getting access token, sending to episodes, episodes getting another access token on behalf of the logged in user, sending to the quote, and getting a quote back if everything is okay and validated. And I can log out. So that's the basic thing of our kind of test system with all these kind of components running. Then I'm putting the system into test mode. I said that I did some changes there, and these changes were, let me see, I run the system in test mode, so I changed this environment variable to test to tell the code that now you are under test. And then I start the same services. So what does it mean to be under test? Well, I'll show you how it works, but behind the scenes, what is happening is that this is the code for the endpoint login. So when the user hits that login endpoint, the code will sense if I am in test. And if I am in test, I will call one authentication function. If I'm not in test mode, it will call the better one with code grunt and so on. And to look a little bit about the test code as well, this is the authenticate for test function. It basically uses a function in MSOL called acquire token by username password, and then I read those from the environment and I send them to Azure AD, and if everything is okay, I get the ID tokens, the access token back. So everything is kind of MSOL, so MSOL is taking taking the code and updating the token cache. The session is kind of handled in the normal way. So this is basically the only test code I have in my application. But I have broken one principle. I've told the system that is under test. So how does this behave if I run it? It looks pretty similar to what you have seen. But the difference is when I sign in here now, the sign-in is taken care of from the back end. So I went to the site, I established a session cookie, I did the login from the back-end side using this new flow, updated the token cache and so on, and refreshed the page. And now I'm logged in as the same user, but I didn't have to go through the code grunt and through Microsoft side to do the logging. So now I have the system typically running in the Docker files, and I'm able to log in a way, no MFA and so on, because I control the test users. And I think that's kind of okay, because everything is synthetic. And that reduces the risk for information exposure and so on. Okay, so now the system is running in test mode, and so on. Let's explore how to do the testing then. Let's open a new window, go to scenario. I should do like that, scenario, and then the client Cypress folder. Don't expect everyone to know Cypress, but it's stored in this folder, and there's some scaffolding, but my tests are basically stored here. So I have installed all the modules previously, so if I open Cypress now, and I have my application running in Docker behind the scenes, it's opened the Cypress client. I select the end-to-end testing module. This is Cypress version 12, by the way, if you want to know that. In Cypress, I can use and test my application over multiple browsers. That's kind of a nice opportunity, but now I just go for the Electron one and start end-to-end testing in that. I have one test script, it's here. Let's click that one and start the test running. So now it's running the system test, that I like to call it. It's driving the experience through the browser, logging in exactly how we did, getting the episodes, verify that the information is kind of correct, and so on. And it's working pretty nice. Not too slow either. And to give you an idea about how I develop tests with Cypress, I would typically have this kind of open and running and go into my test script, which is basically JavaScript, and you can do a lot of interesting things both on the front end, but also on the back end, so that's pretty nice. But anyway, I do a change, I save it, Cypress picks up the change and reruns all the tests. If the test fails, I get good information. If I do that in another page, I can take snapshots of the failing test, I can record videos and so on, so I have good kind of forensic data if my tests are failing to start debugging and so on. But anyways, I fix this error, and my test should be kind of completing and be okay. Unless there are some big surprises coming up. Shouldn't be. Let me grab some water. From the system in the browser. But the next step would be to run them in like a headless mode, and Cypress supports that as well. So I can do the npm run command like this to run Cypress in headless mode. So then I don't need the browser anymore, it will run in a headless. But the same test I can execute it, and of course there's a lot of options to format the output and all that kind of stuff. Haven't put my effort into that one. But now I have run all the same tests against the system running in Docker, and yeah, you can see the results of that as well. So it can work in headless. And the next challenge, or not necessarily a challenge, but the next thing to do is to put the tests into Docker containers as well. So this is the command for running the things inside Docker. I mount up the current directory which contains the test and so on. Cypress provides a lot of pre-baked images for Docker, for various browsers and so on. So I just kind of pull down one of the official ones, and I'm running this on Apple Silicon. That's working great these days. And I tell it to run this test with the Electron and give us information where it should find the system that is kind of running. So I will source in some configuration again, and then I will do the test to run the things inside Docker. So now I'm running the Cypress test inside the Docker container. And the output looks pretty familiar, I guess. Okay, not too bad. I have the system now. I can run the test. I can work one of the components of the system and still do my testing. System testing will give me information about how the system as a whole is actually working from a user perspective. So that's a good place to be. So the next step will be to bring everything together. Like I should be able to run it in a pipeline fully automatic. And to do that, I continue to use Docker Compose. Killing this one. Examining the Docker Compose file a little bit here. So you can see that I'm defining the various services, the client, that's the serving the front page and so on. I have the episodes API, and I have the quotes API, and I have Cypress as well. So I can define all those as services. And I pull down the official image for Cypress to run Cypress. There's one thing that's kind of interesting here, and that's the dependent on, because a typical challenge is that you fire up the test, but the system that you test is not ready. So this will help me because it starts the client service, the episodes API, and the quotes API, and Cypress will not start until they are reported ready. So we are ready to go and have some action, and then Cypress is doing its stuff. That is taking care of some synchronization things. In addition, I run it with this Docker Compose. So I set the system into test mode. I run Docker Compose, and I give some additional values like abort on container exit. So that tells Docker Compose to start up the whole thing, client, episodes, quotes, and then Cypress when they are ready, and then abort when a container exits. And you're going to get the exit code from Cypress. So Cypress is going to do all the testing when it's done, and it's going to exit when it's done. And Docker Compose is also going to exit when it's done, take down all the kind of the system, and the exit code will be from the Cypress testing. So to run this now, I put it in a script, basically simple stuff, but it's running this in Docker Compose now. It's starting up the whole ecosystem. It's talking to Azure AD, but it's my developer Azure AD, to put it like that. It's running all the tests, and this is in test mode. And of course, if you are paying attention, you see that, hey, you're dumping a lot of access tokens into the log and so on, and you shouldn't do that. And I totally agree. I told you there was a bad pattern. So be cautious and do a threat modeling on your test system as well. Because if I do this and store these logs in a place they shouldn't be, there's a good opportunity for abuse. So threat modeling on test system is a good thing as well. The test finished. Everything was kind of okay. And if I echo the exit code from the previous command, I get 0, and this is the exit code from Cypress. And then I can use that in my pipeline. I can set on the configuration and run the test, and if it's kind of 0, I will continue. If it's different from 0, a test has not passed, and I can break the build or the PR or whatever you like to put it into. So to wrap things up, the current state of this for our complex and super modern system, we now have a fully automated system test scenario, a fully synthetic test environment, a system with active authentication authorization is rolling more or less like it will in production, besides for this different flow initially. System has most of the security controls activated. If you paid attention, the only thing that is not activated is the HTTPS on localhost. So if I would just do this in practice, maybe that's the next one I would attack to make sure that that was okay as well. We have very little test support code, 15 lines maybe, and that's the stuff that I need to maintain. And of course, there are some risks related to having that in the code, but I can inject that code in a different way. So that could be handled as well. We have broken a few principles to reach this state, but maybe the trade-offs are acceptable. And again, I can't emphasize enough this stuff about threat modeling your test system as well. Objective of these talks were to get you guys more curious about diverting some of your unit test effort into the system testing, because I think it's super important. And when you do that, keep the security features on as far as possible. I know it's hard. It's not only a technical challenge, but it's definitely doable, in my humble opinion. I also think it's necessary for a lot of our systems. Now I'm ready for questions. Yes, do we have a mic, or just there's a mic coming? Hang on a sec.
You're maintaining the Azure AD separately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you automating that, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I go into Office 365 developer portal. I register an account, and when I do that, I get my own Azure AD instance. It's a level 5 something, so it's quite okay. And then the creation of the test users, the objects, whatever you would like to do, you automate that. The only challenge in that area, or the caveat, is that this Office 365 developer thing is connected to me as a person. I don't think that's ideally, but I'll take that now. And we try to challenge Microsoft if there could be any way of making this a bit more like corporate. I don't know if that's the right word.
Assigning it to Equinor, for instance.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But it isn't a super problem, because if a user leaves and I have to switch to another one, the only thing that I do is actually run my scripts and update the tenant ID in my config, and I'm good to go. So it's not too much work.
No. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. That was a really, really interesting talk. One thing that I see with distributed systems is that when you want to run an integration test, for example, in a GitHub action, and in this example, you have your entire environment running in Docker Compose. Oftentimes, you'll end up with a single component that is being deployed and changed, and then if you're lucky, if you've done the work, you're going to have an integration or a testing environment, right? So you get a single component that is going to be building, which you can signal as in test, and then that GitHub action, that environment has to go and talk with 20 different services to make. How do you think about that?
I would typically think, what are the opportunities?
Yeah.
What are the risk factors? Because I'm from Equinor, we talk about risks all the time. So I would weigh my options. And obviously, things could take time to run these tests. And I also have problems with stuff that I don't control. Maybe I'm not allowed to test them the way I'm doing. So there are a few considerations that you need to make. And maybe putting that test not to run every time there is a change, but you kind of put them into an action and start that manually when you want to get the status of the system. So I'm sorry to say, but it depends. There are no like easy answer to this one. I just want us to use more effort on system testing of the whole system, because I see in our area, people get tired of mocking, and it's super hard to do it. So if there are any alternatives, that's what we're exploring here. Thank you. Other questions, or people have done this differently, want to share? I'm super happy about that as well.
What's the solution for two-factor authentication in tests?
So the question was, what is the solution for two-factor authentication in tests? So the pattern that we used was to use a different flow and we have turned off the two-factor authentication for users. Turning it off, but doing it on a test system with synthetic test data, so if everything is exposed, it shouldn't be a real big problem. I don't know if there is a nice solution for test users with MFA and something turned on. And I also question if we should really do those things in our production Azure AD, because that's a production environment. I would try to avoid mixing testing users and production users and test config with production config, because I see that it's so easy for us as humans to mess up. Running one command, thinking I was updating the QA environment, and suddenly users are calling in and say everything is down. So whatever I can do to reduce that risk, then to me that is synthetic test data, separate production and testing seriously. Thank you for asking.
All right. Hi. I'd just like to take the opportunity to tell my version of it, or another approach that I have went to solve
Please.
Similar.
Do you mind standing up?
Yeah, no worries. Hi. Yeah. It's regarding mock users and app registration within the production Azure environment, not establishing an Office 365 development area, and requesting and gaining access, also using Cypress to authenticate, and making an app registration that is allowed to authenticate against a system or our web application, and also bypassing the two-factor part of it.
So then you're creating a service principal.
Yeah, correct.
And using that one to authenticate, not the user.
Yeah. So we're fetching a token or a key for that, and using that to authenticate to our
the APIs and so on.
Yeah. And it's working.
Yeah.
But it's still in proof of concept state, but I am able to access our application.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Ish.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So if it works for you guys, yes, it should be okay. But then I would really encourage you to have a look at the test principles, and then do a threat modeling on your system, and ask yourself, what are the questions, what could possibly go wrong with this setup?
Yeah.
And if you have some things that you think are risky or challenging, or some threats around, what do we do to mitigate them? As long as you do that, and there are no governance saying thou shall not, yeah, why not?
I see there are security things that we need to check out, and governance and things like that before going all the way, but also keeping track of roles and access to different environments and stuff will be more challenging, this approach, I think, rather than having Office 365, having a self-contained and controlled environment.
It's correct, but I've been around for a while, and I've messed up so many times because I do stuff in various hours of the day, and mistaking production for being developed and so on, I've done it too many times.
Yeah.
So I really want to encourage people to explore the synthetic test data as well, as much as possible. Yeah. I think testing on production data and all that kind of thing is a huge security risk. Like I mentioned initially with this incident that we had, it was a near copy of production, which is pretty useful, normal for us to do. But if data is exposed, then it could be business data, GDPR, you name it. I like to avoid that. I don't want to be on the front page of VG because...
Agreed.
But yeah, good insight. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up question on the same. We are also running a system test with the production Azure AD using a service principle. But in your case, I'm wondering, when you are supposed to verify the access token in your API, won't the issue be something different than it would otherwise be when you use the developer program AD?
So the question was, when I do this pattern and I get the token to the episodes API and I'm going to verify it, won't the issue be different, right? So the way my episodes API works is that it has a configuration parameter which tells it which issuer it should expect. So that is part of my configuration, and that's part of my token validation. So I I pull down the token, I verify the signature by getting the keys and that kind of stuff, and then I do a few other things, and that is to verify the issuer. But the issuer is like a configurable parameter. I just have to adapt that to each of the environments and so on. So that's how we handle that one. That make sense, or?
Yes, as long as it's through configuration and not two different parts in your verification logic.
Oh, it's through configuration. I have told this API that thou shall only accept access token from, and that is configurable. Thank you.
Yes, in my company, we use Blazor WebAssembly combined with BUnit because that gives us the capabilities to actually mock the authentication state of the client, so we can run unit tests very easily to verify the behavior of our client applications, given the various authentication states, also using the backend for front-end pattern.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it is still a unit test that does not leave the unit under test. There is no pipeline testing, no end-to-end testing. Would you still emphasize system testing, even though it introduces secondary ADEs, less secure code, in order to facilitate actually testing the system end-to-end?
In my experience, I would strongly advocate exploring it, at least. Because I see the way things have evolved with how we code, and we do test-driven development and so on. Everything is focused on the unit and assuming the rest of the stuff is working together. But then I see in real life, when we are deploying the application and so on, we get curious problems and incidents, and it's typically because, some component down the road had changed and we didn't pick that up. So whatever we can do to test the whole system in the perspective of the end user, because he or she doesn't matter if the unit test works or not. They want to use it on a daily basis. So I still think that's a good idea. And I acknowledge the culture and the context and so on, but if people would spend some energy on exploring that route, finding what makes sense and so on, that is my objective. Yeah. Thank you. And I would like to learn more about WebAssembly. That sounds really cool.
Well, we haven't looked back since changing.
Haven't?
It, so
how long have you been doing that?
we started back when they released Blazor Web Server, and then the second they released WebAssembly, we pretty much was there from the go live of it, and are now currently porting everything we have to it, because it has just been a wonderful.
Yeah, I looked at it like some years ago in the infancy, but it really, I didn't catch up that it got a lot of attention and adoption. But maybe that is changing now.
Currently, there is a lot of steam on it, both in the adoption of it, but also implementing features and all that stuff to it.
And that is both for the front end now and also for the back end, right?
There are companies like we are using Duende Identity Server for our authentication login and all that, and they are partnered with Microsoft and developing specific NuGet frameworks for enforcing back-end for front-end development patterns in Blazor.
Interesting. I have to create another Explore task for myself, do that kind of stuff. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. It's almost lunch. Maybe you can beat the queue. That's always a good thing. So thank you, guys. I'm Lars Skjorestad. Visit appsec.epi.com if you want to get more information. We love to share and to hear from you guys. And this is where you find everything with the slides and stuff. And I promise you, this QR code is not my attempt to hack you guys. Honestly. So thank you.